Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. Now, a lot of people, well, namely Tesla investors, are saying this $4,500 extra to the US manufacturers with unions and the EV tax credit is really unfair to Tesla. And yes, sure it is. But does it actually make any difference? I mean, it actually doesn't even benefit any EVs for sale today yet anyway, except for Tesla. Well, and except perhaps for the GM Bolt. But I don't think many consumers want to risk their lives in a Bolt to save a further $4,500. The Ford Mach-E is assembled in Mexico, so that doesn't help much either, and already receives the current tax credit. But right from the start, most Teslas in the US should be benefiting from $8,000 of tax credit, and this is likely going to be retroactive too, back from May 24th, 2021, but there is no cap on the tax credit, which means whoever makes the most EVs could receive the most back in tax credits. Well, the company doesn't receive the credits, but their customers do. Now, these tax credits really only benefit Tesla if Tesla can raise their prices. Without the tax credit, well, Tesla would have sold every car they made anyway. The only thing these tax credits do for the manufacturer is increase demand. Tesla probably couldn't have met the supply to match the previous demand anyway. I think it very likely Tesla will launch a standard range version of the Model Y at the new factories. The demand for these will be more than they can make anyway. This is because Tesla can't make enough 4680 batteries to start with, so they have to resort to LFP batteries, as there is enough supply for the batteries coming from CATL. On a standard range in the US would have perhaps cost about $45,000. Perhaps Tesla can raise the prices because they come from the more advanced Texas factory, and the range of the cars might be slightly improved compared to the versions from China. But these standard range Model Ys in the US would only receive a $7,500 tax credit, as the batteries are not made in the US. But there would still be enough demand for these vehicles without the tax credit. So how does it benefit Tesla? It doesn't, unless Tesla raise their prices. What would have been ideal is if Tesla did have the 4680 production up enough to only sell long-range and performance versions from their factories. As these versions are more expensive, there is more profit, but less demand. The tax incentives would have increased the demand enough. But I can't see this being an option. The 4680s are simply not there yet. And besides, I think the nickel is wasted on them trying to push the long-range versions when plenty of consumers will be satisfied with the standard range, particularly as the charging infrastructure improves. I think over the next 2 years alone we'll see some major improvements on Tesla's charging networks, especially in the US. Elon talks about the Model Y demand exceeding 2 million units a year globally, and most people infer that to mean 2 million a year total. But what if it's more like twice that, and at around 4 million or even more? There are no other products that come close to matching a Tesla Model Y on its abilities. When it becomes more affordable but also offers more and more value, like self-driving, then consumers will be willing to spend more on it too. Just because the consumer's budget for a new car currently is $30,000, that doesn't mean they won't stretch to mid-30s for a Tesla. They can make sacrifices elsewhere, like no vacation this year, not going out to eat so much. There are ways to save. However, the savings in fuel costs alone would cover that discrepancy anyway. So perhaps in reality, when the market is educated enough, it may be a consumer with a budget of just $20,000 to $25,000 for a new car can now justify an expense of a new Tesla. And what if Tesla's demand in the US alone for Model Y might be 2 million units a year? But what if demand is even higher if a Model Y starts at around $35,000? And people start to realize the fact Teslas don't depreciate or need fuel and servicing, and the cost of ownership is actually significantly cheaper than any other car available. The tax credit lasts for 10 years. I mean, it's hilarious that the Legacy Auto's target is to be 50% EV sales within 10 years. This is obviously not going to be a thing, especially if this tax credit is still going. 10 years is a long time. Tesla can build a Terafactory in nearly 1 year. If demand for new EVs becomes crazy, and it's not just new car buyers but customers transitioning from ICE to electric too, well, if that's the demand, and Tesla are the only ones with any decent supply, and Tesla's cars are significantly better value than everything else, then even 10 million Teslas a year could be sold in the US. To summarize, the credits increase demand, so for Tesla to benefit and find the market clearing price again, they need to either raise prices or increase supply. These are the only strategies available. If Tesla build a new factory and get supply up to around 10 million units a year in the US, then that probably would be closer to matching demand. But if Tesla do build more factories in the US, it was likely at a cost of building them somewhere else, which means they may not saturate another market so well, due to having to double down in the US. And we didn't even discuss the impact of selling a Model 2 in the US with this discount. What would the demand for a sub $20,000 EV AV be like? Easily another 10 million a year in the US alone. Sounds crazy? Well, think about it. How many people do you know who would not buy a $17,500 Tesla that drives itself? Right? On the other hand, perhaps Tesla has enough batteries and components from their other suppliers, except Tesla are not so vertically integrated and using CATL's batteries at perhaps $100 a kilowatt hour instead of Tesla's own in-house LFP batteries, which might be under $40 a kilowatt hour. So in other words, rather than save costs manufacturing or from parts, outsource more to get more supply to meet this demand, and perhaps raise prices slightly as a result. The market can still handle some price rise due to the extra demand from the tax incentives, and likely the extra demand from the whole EV movement too. But consider the double whammy effect here. We go from an entry-level Model Y currently at $54,000, that's the lowest cost Model Y in the US, which is the long-range version, and this is sold out until February already. What is going to happen when there is a standard range with $7,500 off, and suddenly the price may be around the mid-$30,000? Of course, same for Cybertrucks and the Model 3 standard range at almost $30,000. Maybe Tesla will make another Model 3 factory too, perhaps just a standard range version to sell a $30,000 EV. Anyway, it's all about opportunity cost. What Tesla decide to sell in the US might mean they're not selling them somewhere else, like Australia perhaps, and instead the Chinese enter Australia. I think the Chinese will enter all markets that do not have local car manufacturing, which is what we're seeing with Norway, but not Sweden. Sweden has Volvo to protect, and perhaps the Polestar. So those nations, Japan, France, UK, Italy and Germany, will use protectionism to stop the Chinese entering. But anyway, a Model Y for mid-$30,000, that's irresistible, especially when your local Ford dealer is asking $60,000 for a vastly inferior Mach-E, especially when it only receives a $7,500 credit and not the full $12,500, let alone comparing a Model Y to any even more inferior ICE autos, which the demand should have fallen out the market by then, along with supply. The microchip shortage is potentially accelerating this EV movement as it is, but this tax credit on top of that is like pouring gasoline on the flames from the burning ICE industry. It will end the ICE side of legacy autos very quickly, resulting in massive downsizing. Legacy car dealers will likely only have electric and used ICE, and all will be sold at huge premiums. But many car dealers won't be able to survive due to lack of both supply and demand. This is why government should rarely get involved. It's terribly hard to control an economy. They're best left as free markets. This will result in the opposite of what the government are intending, i.e. massive early downsizing, resulting in a lot of lost jobs. Any smart consumer will simply join the 2-year waiting list for a new Tesla at a reasonable price with their tax credit, and just hold on to their ICE vehicle that much longer. Some consumers will want something earlier or a bit different, and pay extra for a new electric Cadillac. Oh wait, that Cadillac won't make the cut for tax incentives after the dealer premium, nor the Hummer. Oh GM, you may not get any benefit from this credit for some time. In fact, the only US-made EV to benefit anytime soon, aside from Tesla, will be the F-150 Lightning, and only the most basic version of that. Oh, and only about 15,000 units next year. This may not have been thought through so well. I think auto inflation is on the way. It will be temporary as EV supply does pick up over the years, but namely Tesla. Everyone else's numbers are just pale in comparison, especially when you factor in Tesla's new factories. In reality, Tesla owners will likely receive something like 80 to 90% of the tax credits, simply because that will be about Tesla's market share. The tax incentives will likely not do much to progress the company, I don't think, as they're just an opportunity cost of selling more in the US instead of Europe, for example. But if robotaxis are out, then Tesla can likely serve those in various other markets. Anyway, the tax credit does minimal to benefit the EV industry as a whole. It might simply mean that Americans adopt EVs that much earlier due to extra supply going in from Tesla. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.